The stars were calm that night. Far from Earth, the black sea of space stretched like a giant ocean with no wind and no waves. A single human ship, the Vanguard, moved slowly through the emptiness. It was not a warship, but it carried soldiers. It was not a research vessel either, but it carried scientists. It was something in between, a symbol of what humanity had become. Explorers who also knew how to fight. Commander Elias Vance stood at the wide window on the bridge, looking out at the endless stars. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were calm. He had seen many battles. He had walked on alien worlds. But tonight felt different. The sensors had picked up something huge ahead, an Empire's flagship. And not just any empire. It belonged to the Selnari Dominion. The Selnari were not known for peace. "They're not answering our calls," said Lieutenant Marla, breaking the silence. She sat at the communications desk, tapping on glowing blue panels. Same thing as before. Total silence. Elias didn't move. "Keep trying." Everyone on the bridge felt the tension. The Selnari were tall, pale-skinned beings with black eyes and smooth, sharp features. They ruled a part of the galaxy with fear, not diplomacy. No one had ever spoken directly with their queen. She was like a myth, powerful, distant, untouchable. But the Vanguard was now right at the edge of her empire. "Sir, they've locked on us," said the weapons officer, voice tight. I think they're pulling us in." Elias turned from the window. He knew this was coming. The Selnari didn't talk. They captured first, asked questions later. "Prepare for boarding," he said. A low alarm began to hum through the corridors of the Vanguard. Red lights flashed gently along the walls. No panic, everyone had trained for this. Elias walked toward the lift, his boots echoing against the steel floor. The alien ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. The boarding tubes wrapped around the Vanguard like a spider's legs. The airlock hissed. A cold wind rushed through the corridor as the first Selnari soldiers stepped inside. They wore armor that shimmered like liquid silver. Their eyes had no pupils, only black pools that reflected everything. Their movements were silent, precise. Elias and his team held their ground, weapons lowered but ready. They knew resistance was pointless. Not here, not against a Selnari dreadnought. A voice came through a strange translator device on the alien commander's chest. It was low, echoing. "Commander Elias Vance," it said in broken English. "You are ordered to come." Elias nodded. "I'll come alone." The alien commander tilted its head slightly as if surprised. No human had ever spoken so calmly to a Selnari soldier before, but it didn't argue. It simply gestured for him to follow. The corridor of the alien ship was long and curved, like walking inside the skeleton of a massive creature. The walls glowed softly with blue veins of light. There were no buttons, no control panels, no doors Elias could see. Everything seemed alive. He kept walking, his wrists bound by a glowing ring of energy. The guards said nothing. Their footsteps made no sound. He felt like a single spark surrounded by a storm. Then the corridor opened into a massive throne hall. Elias had seen alien leaders before, but nothing like this. The alien queen Thalra sat on a throne made of black crystal that seemed to drink the light around it. Her skin was pale silver, smooth like polished stone. Her hair, if it could be called hair, flowed like a dark mist around her head. Her eyes were bright like burning stars, and when they locked onto Elias, the air itself felt heavy. But what made him freeze for half a second was not her power. It was the silence. The entire hall was silent. Hundreds of alien guards stood around the edge of the room. Not one made a sound. Not one breathed loud. Only the faint pulse of light in the walls could be heard. Elias was pushed to his knees. But he didn't lower his head. He looked straight at the queen. Thalra leaned forward slowly. She had seen many creatures from many worlds. Most bowed before her without question. Most shook in fear. But this human did not. "Strange," she said, her voice smooth but sharp. "This one does not tremble." The translator did not need to repeat her. Her voice was inside his mind, a cold touch like a wave of winter wind. Elias took a steady breath. Humans don't break that easily. For the first time in a very long time, the queen smiled. Not kindly, but with interest. "We will see." The Selnari queen had the power of mind touch, a deep telepathic ability that could break the strongest alien leaders in minutes. It was said that even warlords begged for mercy after a few moments under her gaze. She reached forward slowly and the room seemed to tilt. A ripple of pressure moved through the air. Elias felt it like a hand pressing against his skull. The temperature dropped. His heart raced, but he held his ground. Inside his mind, memories began to flicker like pages being turned too fast. She was looking, searching, testing. She saw the burning sky of Mars during the colony wars. She saw him dragging a wounded friend through red dust. She saw him standing in a storm with no air and no help, teeth clenched, refusing to die. Then she tried to push deeper. She found the face of his mother smiling. A young boy standing in the rain. The sound of music. The warmth of fire. The laughter of friends after victory. Human things. Small things. Unbreakable things. But she didn't find fear. Thalra's smile slowly faded. Her eyes narrowed. She pushed harder, and then something happened she did not expect. The human mind pushed back. A wall of iron will rose in front of her like a sudden mountain. She felt it, steady, hot, alive. The force of emotion, defiance, humanity. She gasped softly. No one had ever made her gasp. Around the throne room, her guards shifted uneasily. They could feel their queen's power meeting something it had never faced before. Elias was still kneeling, but his eyes never left hers. "What are you?" Thalra whispered inside his mind. "Human," Elias answered. Hours passed like minutes. The Selnari ship continued to glide silently through space, carrying its strange prisoner and its unsettled queen. Thalra sat alone in her private chamber after the encounter, hands resting on her knees. The images she had seen inside the human's mind still burned behind her eyelids. No alien had ever stood so strong against her power. No one had looked her in the eyes without fear. It was not strength of body. It was something else, a kind of stubborn light that refused to be crushed. She should have erased him. She should have turned him into another memory. But she didn't, she couldn't. She turned to the window. Outside, the stars burned like distant fires. "Human," she whispered to herself. "What have you done to me?" Meanwhile, back on the Vanguard, the remaining human crew waited in silence. Their captain was gone. Their ship was under alien control. But no one panicked. Humans were strange like that. They could be trapped in the dark and still believe in a way out. They trusted Elias. And Elias, somewhere deep inside that alien ship, was already making the queen of an empire question her certainty. The Selnari High Council gathered in a dark hall somewhere else in the ship. Dozens of alien commanders spoke in low, calm voices. The queen rarely showed emotion. But tonight, they had seen the way she looked at the human. They had heard the whispers of the guards. A single human had done something no one thought possible. He had shaken the unshakable. "This human is dangerous," one commander said. Another replied, "Dangerous, or useful." But none of them could predict what was already happening inside the queen's mind. A seed had been planted. A strange, unwanted feeling. Not weakness, not fear, curiosity. Elias lay on the cold floor of a cell, staring at the ceiling. But he wasn't afraid. He had seen the queen's face when their minds touched. For a split second, the unbreakable had cracked, and in war sometimes a single crack was enough. The engines of the Selnari dreadnought hummed softly through the metal walls. The stars outside moved like slow rivers of light, and in the quiet, Elias Vance smiled. The cell was cold and silent. Elias Vance sat on the floor with his back against the wall. He had no chains now, only the invisible walls of alien power. The Selnari did not need iron. Their control came from the mind. For 2 days they had said nothing. No food, no questions, no threats. Just silence. But Elias knew they were watching him. They always watched. The soft hum of the ship's engines was like a heartbeat in the background. Every few hours, a thin blue light passed across the cell. It scanned him, recorded every breath, every heartbeat. He refused to look weak. Then finally the door opened with a low hiss. 2 guards stepped in, tall and silent as shadows. Between them floated a silver sphere, spinning slowly like it was alive. "You will come," said the translator on one guard's chest. Elias stood up slowly. He didn't resist. He had learned long ago that sometimes strength meant waiting for the right moment. The guards led him through the long, glowing corridor. This time he was not taken to the throne room. They entered a different chamber, wide, circular, and almost empty. The walls were covered with shifting lights like moving water. In the center stood a single platform made of dark glass, and waiting on that platform was Queen Thalra. She was not wearing her crown. No throne, no guards around her except the two who brought Elias. She stood tall, silent, her black eyes glowing faintly. "Human," her voice echoed inside his head, smooth and cold. "You will face the trial of silence." Elias said nothing. He had heard stories of alien telepathic trials. None ended well for humans, but this was no ordinary moment. This was the Queen herself. The guards pushed him forward. The floor beneath the platform lit up with soft blue light. The air changed, heavier, sharper. It felt like he was stepping into water that wasn't really there. Thalra raised one hand and the silver sphere floated between them. Then it opened like a flower made of light. A wave of cold rushed into the chamber. Elias felt it like needles against his skin. "This trial," she whispered in his mind, "has broken every leader who stood before me. You will not last long." Elias met her gaze. "We'll see." The Queen's eyes narrowed. Then it began. At first it was quiet. Then a soft whisper filled his head. It was not a voice. It was a pressure, like the air inside his skull was too small. His heartbeat quickened. Shadows moved at the edge of his vision, even though the room was still. She entered his mind again, but deeper this time. She saw his first day at the academy. She saw a boy with a sharp smile and stubborn eyes standing in the rain with a broken umbrella. She saw the cold mornings of training, the friends he lost in battles, the pain he carried without showing. She tried to use these memories to break him. She twisted them, turning laughter into echoes, warmth into smoke. But the human mind was strange. The more she pushed, the more she saw things she didn't understand. A little girl on Earth handing him a flower. A group of soldiers singing on a ship with broken engines. A family holding hands during a storm. A single word painted on a wall. Hope. She frowned. Why did these weak creatures keep standing up? Elias felt pain behind his eyes. It was like a storm of knives inside his head. But even through the pain, he saw something else, and her. He saw Thalra standing inside a storm of stars. Her face calm, but her mind cracking. She expected fear. She found resistance. She pushed harder. Images of destruction filled the room. Burning worlds, collapsing ships, endless darkness. She tried to bury him under the weight of her empire's power, but Elias did not fall. He remembered the dust of Mars, the storm, the moment when everyone else gave up and he kept walking. He remembered a teacher who once said, "Humans are impossible to break because we already live with broken pieces. We just keep moving." His voice echoed in his mind, then in hers. "You're not the first to try," he whispered. The Queen froze. The link between their minds had grown stronger. She could hear his thoughts now, not just see them. He should be afraid, she thought. But he's not. The floor trembled softly. The blue lights on the wall pulsed faster. Her power should have crushed him by now. And yet, he was still standing. "Why do you not break?" Her voice thundered inside his skull. Elias lifted his head. His vision blurred, but his smile didn't fade. "Because I'm human." The Queen stepped closer, her pale face only inches from his. The silver sphere spun faster between them. The temperature dropped, but in his eyes she saw no fear, only a quiet, burning will. In that moment, something inside her changed. She felt something she had not felt in centuries. Doubt, and worse, curiosity. The trial was meant to end with the human on the floor begging. Instead, the chamber shook with the force of two minds colliding. The Queen pushed again, but what came back was not a wall. It was a flood. Elias's memories exploded into her mind like sunlight through glass. She saw Earth, green fields, blue oceans, storms, cities, laughter, pain, songs, war, peace. She saw generations rising and falling, and still the species stood tall. She saw humans arguing, crying, laughing, building, burning, rebuilding. She had conquered planets that fell silent after one defeat. But these creatures, they kept rising. For the first time, Thalra stumbled backward. The silver sphere cracked and burst into dust. The glowing walls dimmed. Elias fell to one knee, breathing hard. Blood ran from his nose, but he was still conscious. The Queen stared at him, wide-eyed. Her chest rose and fell quickly. No one had ever done this to her before. This is not possible," she whispered. Elias wiped the blood from his lip and smiled weakly. "Welcome to humanity." Outside the chamber, guards stared through the transparent wall in shock. The queen, their perfect, unbreakable queen, had taken a step back. They had never seen her shaken. "Not once. What is happening?" One whispered. Another replied, "He's still alive." Inside, the queen lifted her hand. For a second, Elias thought she would strike him down, but her hand trembled slightly. She clenched it and turned away. "End the trial," she ordered. The walls returned to normal. The blue light softened. Two guards rushed in to take Elias away, but the queen raised her hand again. "No," she said quietly. "Leave him." The guards froze. The queen walked closer to Elias and stared into his tired but steady eyes. "You are not like the others," she whispered. "No," Elias said softly. "I'm human." Her black eyes burned brighter, but not with anger. With something else. Later that night, Thalra stood alone in the throne hall. The stars outside the wide windows burned silently. The chamber was empty except for her. For centuries she had ruled by fear. No one had ever stood against her power. No one had made her feel like this. But a single human, a soldier from a small blue world, had shown her something she couldn't erase from her mind. He had shown her the fire of his kind. Her fingers touched her temple. His memories were still there, like sparks refusing to die. Laughter, rain, earth. She whispered to herself, "Why can I not stop thinking about him?" Elias, meanwhile, sat in his cell. His head throbbed, his body ached, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. He had not just survived the trial, and he had shaken the queen. He thought about her face. For a moment, she had not been a queen. She had been curious. Human emotions were spreading like fire inside her, and that gave him an idea. A dangerous one. "She's not untouchable," he whispered to himself. "She can feel." For the first time since his capture, Elias allowed himself to laugh. Not loudly. Just a small, quiet laugh in the dark. The war between their people was still far from over. But something powerful had begun. In another part of the ship, the Selnari Council gathered again. The air was tense. Words like unacceptable and dangerous filled the room. "The human survived," one counselor said. "He did more than survive," another replied. He touched her mind. Fear rippled through them. If a single human could shake their queen, what would happen if the rest of humanity stood behind him? They had built their empire on control, and this one human had just shown that control could be broken. Thalra returned to her private chamber and stood before the mirror made of black crystal. She stared at her own reflection, but behind her eyes, she saw his. "Human," she whispered softly, almost like a secret, "what have you done to me?" The stars outside continued to burn, but for the first time she wasn't sure they belonged to her anymore. The Selnari dreadnought drifted through the black sea of space, silent like a sleeping beast. But inside, everything was changing. The guards no longer spoke with the same cold confidence. The council whispered behind closed doors, and at the center of it all was a single human, Commander Elias Vance. 3 days had passed since the trial of silence, yet the Queen had not called for his execution. She had not erased him from existence like she had done to so many before. Instead, she visited him every day, not with soldiers, not with weapons, with questions. Elias sat in the same cell, but it no longer felt like a prison. The walls were still cold. The blue scanning light still came and went, but there was a strange warmth in the air now. Something had shifted. The door opened softly. Thalra entered alone, her steps silent against the smooth floor. She no longer wore her black armor. Instead, she wore a long silver robe that shimmered like starlight. Her black eyes glowed faintly. Elias looked up from where he sat, back straight, calm. He didn't speak first, she did. "Human," she said slowly, almost like she was tasting the word. "You do not fear me." Elias gave a small smile. "I told you. Humans are stubborn." She tilted her head, studying him. There was no rage in her voice, no cold superiority. There was something else, something she herself didn't understand. "Stubbornness is not strength," she whispered. "Maybe not," Elias replied softly. "But it keeps us standing when everything else falls." The Queen fell silent. His words were simple, but they stayed in her mind like sharp stones in still water. In the High Council chamber, far from the cell, the Selnari commanders argued. Their faces were cold, but their voices were hot. "She's losing control," one hissed. "She's changing," another whispered. The human did something to her mind. He must be destroyed. But none of them dared confront the queen directly. They had seen what happened in the trial. If she could be shaken, could she also be broken? One commander finally said the words they were all thinking. If she will not destroy the human, then perhaps we must. And in that quiet, dangerous moment, a secret plan was born. Thalra sat in her private chamber later that night, staring at the stars. The room was dark except for the light from the giant window. She saw her empire, millions of stars she controlled through fear. But now the stars did not look like trophies, they looked distant. She remembered Elias's memories, the laughter, the warmth, the way he stood against her without bowing. No other being had ever faced her power like that, and what frightened her most was not his strength. It was the way it made her feel. For centuries, her empire had been built on control, on silence, on obedience. She had felt nothing for a long time. But this human, this small, fragile creature, had broken the silence inside her. She touched her temple. His voice was still in her head. "We stand when everything else falls," she whispered softly to the empty room. "Why can I not stop thinking of you?" The next morning, the alarm rang across the dreadnought. The low, deep sound shook the walls. Elias looked up sharply. Something was happening. The cell door burst open. Not the queen. Not her guards. The council soldiers, dressed in darker armor, carrying heavy weapons. Their movements were sharp and fast. Commander Vance once said through the translator, "You will come with us." Elias narrowed his eyes. He had seen enough wars to know the difference between an order and a plot. "Where's the queen?" he asked. "She will not save you," the soldier replied coldly. They dragged him out of the cell and down a corridor he had not seen before. It was narrow, darker, and colder than the rest of the ship. At the end was a large door, the kind built for things no one was supposed to return from. Elias didn't fight, but his mind raced. He knew what was happening. The council wanted to end the human before he could change the queen any further. In the throne hall, Thalra stood before the great window when one of her loyal guards ran in, breathing fast. "My queen," the guard said urgently. "The council has taken the human." The queen turned slowly. "What? They plan to end him? They say it's for the good of the empire." Her black eyes burned like fire. For the first time in centuries, the ship felt her anger. "Find them," she whispered. "Now." Elias was thrown into a round chamber deep in the ship's lower decks. The walls were covered with cold metal spikes and humming blue lights. It wasn't a cell. It was an execution chamber. The counselors stood around him. Their long silver cloaks brushed the floor as they moved like shadows. One of them spoke through a translator. "The queen is no longer fit to rule. Your presence has poisoned her mind. Humanity will not rise. It will end here." Elias smiled faintly despite the situation. "You're afraid of us," the counselor hissed. "We are afraid of nothing." But their eyes told a different story. They had seen the queen, their unbreakable queen, hesitate. And if she could hesitate, the whole empire could crack. They raised a glowing spear of energy over him, and then the door exploded open. The blast echoed through the chamber like thunder. A wave of bright blue light filled the room. Selnari guards were thrown aside like paper, and at the doorway stood Queen Thalra, her black eyes blazing. "Enough," she said. The counselors froze. No one had ever heard her voice like that, not cold and distant, but burning with something alive. "He is dangerous," one of them shouted. "He has changed you. If he lives, everything we built will fall." "Then let it fall," she said. The entire room went silent. The counselors stepped back. She walked toward Elias slowly, every step shaking the floor. She raised her hand and with a single motion shattered the glowing energy bindings around him. Elias stood tall beside her. "This human is not your ruler," a counselor hissed. "But he has already taken your mind." Thalra looked at Elias and then back at the counselors. Her voice was calm but sharp like a blade. "He has not taken anything," she said. "He has shown me what I have forgotten. I ruled through fear because I thought nothing was stronger than it. I was wrong." The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, their queen was not one of them. She turned toward Elias. "When I saw your mind," she said softly, "I felt something I had not felt in centuries. Not fear, not weakness, life. The council made their choice. They raised their weapons. But the queen raised her hand first. The entire room filled with a wave of telepathic force so strong that the lights shattered. The counselors fell to their knees, groaning in pain. Elias could feel the pressure in the air, but it did not crush him. She was not attacking him. She was protecting him. When the light faded, the counselors lay unconscious on the floor. Talra stood breathing hard, the silver robe torn at the edges, but her eyes steady. Elias looked at her for a long moment. "Why?" he asked quietly. "You could have let them do it." "I'm just one man." The queen took a slow breath. "Because you reminded me that I can choose." Hours later, the queen stood in the throne room again, but this time not alone. Hundreds of Silnari officers and soldiers filled the hall. The council had been removed from power. And at the center of the hall, Elias stood beside her. She raised her hand. The room fell silent. "For centuries," she said, her voice carrying through the hall, "we have ruled through fear. We believed strength was silence. We believed power meant never feeling. But I have seen something different." She pointed to Elias. "This human came from a small world, a world without empires like ours, and yet he stood against me, alone. He did not break. He made me feel what power truly is." The officers shifted uncomfortably. The word feel had no place in their empire, but no one dared speak against her. "Fear ends today," she said. "We will build something new." With them, the hall filled with murmurs, some in shock, some in fear, some in hope. Elias looked up at the stars through the great window. He had not come here to conquer anything. He was just a soldier who refused to kneel, but somehow that had changed the course of an empire. Thalra stood next to him, her long silver robe moving softly in the artificial breeze. For the first time since he met her, her voice was quiet, human quiet. "Do all your kind carry such fire in their minds?" she asked. Elias chuckled. "Pretty much." She looked at him for a long time, then turned her gaze back to the stars. "Then the galaxy will never be the same." Far away, the first human fleet received a message. It was not a threat, not a warning, a simple transmission. "The Silnari Dominion does not bow, but neither do the humans. We stand together." Thalra, across the stars, whispers began to spread. Two powers that were meant to destroy each other had instead chosen a different path, and it had all started with a single human who refused to break. In her private chamber later that night, Thalra stood by the window alone. The stars looked different now, not distant, not silent. She closed her eyes and remembered his words. "Humans are stubborn," she smiled faintly. The unbreakable queen who had once felt nothing, now felt everything. "Human," she whispered to the stars, "what have you done to me?" Outside, the universe moved forward, not in silence, but in change.